First of all, I wanted to start off by saying congratulations on The Breach. I've had a chance to sit down and watch it, and it's an absolutely amazing film, so congratulations.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm glad you liked it. I really loved the script when we did it, when I first read it, and then it was a great movie to develop. It had a very Lovecraftian kind of thing to it, and then at the same time, very much like sort of an '80s pseudo sci-fi kind of thing. And it was shot, it was shot during lockdown in a little sort of woodsy enclave in Ontario, and the entire cast and crew all lived in this little empty motel for the duration of the production. And it was really sort of a miracle that the movie got made at all.
I was going to ask you about that. You mentioned about it being shot during the lockdown and during the pandemics. There was a lot of films here in Australia that fell by the wayside during that time because of the fact that they couldn't shoot. Was that something that you were worried about during that time?
Well, I mean, obviously it was something that I was worried about, but it was something that fortunately we were able to build everything that we needed on one location. And, since it was a lot of outdoors and there was only a couple different interior shots, we managed to find everything we needed on one location, and everybody committed to just living out in the woods for, the 6 weeks it took to make the movie.
So, mate, tell us...
It quite easily would have not been made, yeah.
Yeah. So, mate, tell us a little bit about your journey with the film. You mentioned that you fell in love with it the moment that you first read the script. Was that how it all started for you? Was it the script arriving in your hand that started this journey?
Well, yeah, what happened was Rodrigo Gordino, who is actually my partner now, but I've known him for since my first film back in 2013, and he's a great writer, and he's also the chief editor of Rue Morgue magazine, if you're familiar with that.
Yep.
But yeah, so he's a great writer, and he has turned me on to a few different scripts over the years, which have all been good. But anyway, he brought me this one, and I fell in love with it, and so we said let's develop this, and it just went from there.
You mentioned that there's a little bit of a Lovecraftian feel to it as well. Is Lovecraft a writer that you look up to?
Yeah, I mean, H.P. Lovecraft was something that when I was a kid living in England, my dad, I mean, I'm talking about really young, I had a passion for horror movies and anything having to do with horror. The special effects and the makeup and the characters and the movies themselves and everything that went into the production of these movies. So my dad taught me how to read before I even really started school. And because I was inspired by this horror stuff, he gave me all like Lovecraft and Ray Bradbury and Edgar Allan Poe books to read. That's how I learned to read. So H.P. Lovecraft was always a big influence on me. I mean, because he was definitely one of the most original, one of the most haunting and morose authors in the sort of horror genre. So that's always stuck with me.
Yeah. Have you been a fan of the movies that have come out over the years based on his work? Like, there's been some really, really good ones, and there's been a few average ones as well. What's your general thought been on the films that's been based on his writing over the years?
Well, I'm trying to think of one that has really ever hit me, has affected me as much as any of his books have. I've never seen a film that was based on one of his stories that was as visceral and haunting and scary and unnerving and as imaginative as his stories, as they're written. I'm trying to think if there's something that one out of a dozen movies that have been made based on his stories that I really like, but it's just not coming to me.
Yeah. So, with that feeling in mind that there was a Lovecraft feel to this, was that something that you and Rodrigo talked about when you first started to work on the film?
It definitely came up in conversation early on. It wasn't something that we were striving for necessarily when we were filming the movie, but when I first read the script, there was definitely some Lovecraftian flavor in it, and I think that we didn't work towards trying to make it an H.P. Lovecraft influenced movie, but I think there is a little bit of that in there.
Yep. So tell us a little bit about the casting as well, because there's some amazing casting decisions with this film. Alan Hawko is magnificent in it. Tell us a little bit about those casting decisions and that process as well.
Well, he's great. I mean, now, in all honesty, when casting came about, it happened relatively quickly, and it was all Canadian actors. A lot of it having to do with the fact that, well, there was, I mean, he's obviously a really popular actor in Canada, but a lot of it had to do with the fact that we were doing it in lockdown as well. And so things happened very quickly. And I wasn't real familiar with any of these actors. And Andrew Hunn, who's another one of my partners, who's actually based out of Toronto, he sort of, went after the casting pretty aggressively, and he sent me some stuff, and I thought, okay, well, this person's great, but I don't know who they are, and we just did it like that.
Yep. I was reading
really knowledge on my behalf.
I was reading a lot of the interviews with you over the years where you've been talking about your love for horror films, and then having watched The Breach, I pretty quickly picked up that this is the kind of film that you would have loved when you were a youngster watching horror films. Am I right in assuming that?
Yeah, definitely. This is one of those stories that I would have picked up on easily when I was a kid. My tastes in horror really, have not changed. I'm still sort of turned on by the same kind of stuff, although it's a pretty broad range of things that I like. But yeah, this was something that definitely would have fallen into that category.
Now, in this episode of the show, all of us sat down and talked about, like all of our co-hosts, we sat down and talked about our favorite horror films that we've loved over the years. What are some of the horror films that you have loved over the years?
Well, okay. I mean, there's a lot of them. I mean, if we're talking over the years, I mean, more recently, I always mention The Witch because that was such a standout film to me.
Yep.
I thought Robert Eggers, it was the first thing I'd ever seen that he'd done, and I just thought it was brilliant, and it really just gave me hope for the future as far as genre movies in general. And then another one was Hereditary, which obviously everybody loves, but that was such a fucking amazing sort of, one of those standout movies that you weren't really expecting. It Follows was great. I'm just talking about ones that have come out in the last, 20 years.
Yeah.
But I mean, going back farther, I was heavily influenced by a lot of the stuff that came out of the 50s, like The Fly, the original Fly and Return of the Fly, both Vincent Price movies, both great. And also the abominable Dr. Fives and Abominable Dr. Fives Returns, I think it was the second one was called.
Yep.
So those were, and that was the 50s. I think that was more early 70s. Day of the Triffids was a big one for me, but I think the one that influenced me the most was The Omen, the original Omen,
yep.
which was fucking The Thing. The John Carpenter's The Thing was a standout for me. And a fucking great score. And then the movie that scared me when I was a kid, because in England I watched a lot of Hammer movies, and they were all great, and they scared me, but I was so fascinated and enthralled by it that I didn't have time to really be scared. But when I first moved to the States, I went with my mom and her best friend to a drive-in and saw The Exorcist and The Night of the Living Dead, a double feature.
Wow.
And Night of the Living Dead scared the shit out of me.
Yep.
That really unsettled me because that's a very raw and visceral and fucking subdued kind of slow torture kind of movie, And then The Exorcist, I just I loved The Exorcist, but again, it was just very entertaining, and it wasn't. I mean, at the time, they had all these reports of people fucking throwing up after the movie and running and just being scared shitless, and it didn't do that to me at all. But I loved it, and I had a crush on Linda Blair for a couple of years after that.
Could you ever see yourself directing a horror film? Is that a path that you would ever go down?
It comes up a lot. People always want to know if you're going to act or if you're going to direct. I think, directing is a talent of filmmaking that you just don't go, oh, I'm going to direct this. I mean, some people, I think, do it, but I think I would have to really focus, sort of like playing guitar or picking up any instrument, where you really need to sit down and fucking, hone in on your craft. I can't imagine I would all of a sudden be good at directing. But it's not something that I aspire to do at the moment. I like producing because I like finding a good story and then trying to get all the components together to make something really cool. That's something that's right in my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
But I don't have any aspirations to direct, and and there's so many great directors out there that know what they're doing. And then I don't want to act. I cannot. Acting is fascinating to me. The people can do it, because it's so foreign. For me to get in front of a camera is bad enough, but to actually try and portray a character and play pretend for however long the shoot is, I can't fathom.
Yeah. Talking about honing in on your craft, though, you also composed with this film. What was that like for you from an artistic point of view?
Well, I've actually done a lot of work with movies over the years.
Yep.
But when it comes to actually composing for a film, I've only done it a few times, and the reason I keep doing it is because there is a side of me that writes to a visual or to a concept, like a story, that I don't have access to if I'm just sitting around writing something on my own that's supposed to be sort of geared towards a song or something for a band. It's like another part of my brain sort of gets ignited when I start writing for an actual script. So I really enjoy that, and also for me, the ultimate entertainment experience is the right piece of music with the right visual. I mean, that for me is pretty orgasmic. And so that's something I can really focus on and get into. But I mean, at the same time, I don't want to be a scoring composer. I don't want to be sitting at a console day in and day out trying to, it's a very slow process. But I like to write stuff and then work with a composer to sort of transpose the instruments and try and figure out what this melody should be and what kind of instrumentation it's going to be, orchestration, all that kind of stuff. I do enjoy that process.
Yeah. I don't want to keep you over your time because you've been so gracious with your time, but I just wanted to quickly ask, what is your process with composing? Do you sit with your guitar while you're watching a scene, or how does that process work for you?
Yeah, it's because I'm still sort of new to it. I can't say that I have an exact sort of scientific approach to it, but so far it's been, I get inspired by the script and start running some ideas in my head based on that, and then when I get a hold of it, like in this case with The Breach, because we were on lockdown, I was in Los Angeles and they were in Ontario, in Canada. But I wanted to get on top of the music before the movie was finished, so they would send me dailies, and then I would take the musical idea based off the script and put it to the visual and develop it from there. And that worked out really well. So I think it just depends on each project how it's going to go. But the script is the first thing. As soon as you have that and start coming up with some ideas based off the feel of the story, that's really the key thing.
Well, Slash, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to chat to us today. And to finish off, what would you like to say to people out there who are about to sit down and watch The Breach here in Australia?
Just I hope you like it. It was something that I thought was really cool, and it's a cool slow burn. It's got very much of a sort of an 80s feel, like an almost like Reanimator kind of vibe to it, although it has nothing to do with anything like Reanimator, but just that sort of texture to it. But yeah, I just hope that you dig it.